Through the bedroom window, I saw what my cheating wife and my brother were doing. The night was just beginning, and they had no idea what fiery horror awaited them come morning. Hello everyone. I've always heard the expression, nobody's perfect. If that's true, then I'm normal. I mean, I'm not perfect. My biggest flaw, which I keep under control, is the most serious one. I love starting fires. When I was younger, this was a real problem, and that's how I got my nickname, Arsonist Mickey. My name isn't Mick or Michael, but Tomas Clark. It's one of the most common names in America, which can be both a blessing and a curse. However, let's get back to my nickname. My brother Walter gave it to me when I was 12. This name stuck with me for a long time, but when I learned to better control my impulses, the role of arsonist was forgotten, although everyone still called me Mickey. Sometimes it was awkward to explain that my real name is Tomas. My second problem is that I have an unusual reaction to beer. If I drink more than one mug of beer, I fall asleep. If I manage to drink 2 or more, I completely pass out for 10 to 12 hours. It was much easier to accept the beer problem than the pyromania. I didn't quit drinking entirely, but I understood when, where, and how much I could handle. When I was 14, I spent the summer experimenting with my fire-starting skills. Several garages and sheds in the neighborhood fell victim to my experiments. Of course, I quickly realized that this wasn't something to share with friends or family. Unfortunately, I was young and reckless. I got caught quickly and went through legal and psychological procedures. However, I never lost interest in fires. I spent a lot of time researching and experimenting, but always without the risk of being discovered or embarrassed. Besides the usual problems, growing up wasn't easy. My older brother Walter was always the favorite and the best student. I had to struggle to keep my head above water, and he became a genius in studies, a hero in sports, and a heartbreaker. The fact that I was his younger brother didn't affect my self-esteem. The happiest day of my life was when he went to college, of course, with a full scholarship. As clumsy as I was, I managed to finish high school and get a job as a roofer. I actually liked my job. I think I had something like attention deficit disorder because I found it hard to stay in any job for more than a few days. My choice of profession helped me avoid this problem to some extent. I always started a new job and finished it before losing interest. It was a rather fortunate coincidence. Over time, I was able to keep my ailment under control. 10 years passed after finishing high school before I could meet a girl and start a relationship. Another year passed before I could pop the question. From a girl's point of view, Melanie was almost perfect. She wasn't very demanding, but I really couldn't find any flaws in her. She had beautiful brown hair, a nice complexion, and an attractive figure. As soon as we managed to save enough money, we bought a small house to start a family. Everything was going well until my brother Walter decided to visit us. Walter finished college and got a job as an electrical engineer. He worked at one of the big chemical companies in North Carolina. I hadn't seen him in almost 10 years and wasn't looking forward to seeing him now. We all gathered at Mom and Dad's house for a family reunion. Walter had just returned from Pocono, where he bought a cabin on 5 acres of wooded land. From the photos, it looked more like a hunting lodge. Over Labor Day weekend, he was going to have an open house and gave us detailed directions on how to get there. Walter's wife, Emma, was in North Carolina with their 2 kids. He was very eager for us to meet her and the kids at the cabin later that summer. Things were going better than I expected until I noticed that Melanie and Walter were getting quite friendly. I expected my wife to be polite, but the interaction with Walter wasn't normal. She was flirting, and he was playing along. Suddenly, I remembered the reasons why I hated my brother. He was leaving the next day, and I didn't want to make a scene. I forced myself to spend more time with my father than I wanted, just to avoid seeing Melanie and Walter together. It was time for us to go home when Melanie hit me with an unexpected blow. She invited Walter to spend the night in our guest room. I was ready to kill her right there. It got worse when she told me she was going to drive home with Walter because she had never driven a Mercedes. I knew it was a lie, but it seemed like it didn't matter anymore. I tried hard not to show my anger. I never expected this from Melanie, but she had never met Walter. He was handsome and could charm anyone into anything. Melanie spent too much time showing him the house and telling him how she was going to decorate each room. We finally got to sit down and relax when Melanie brought a couple of cans of beer. I usually drink 2 or 3 glasses of beer a month, and only when I plan to stay home and go to bed immediately. Walter looked around and smiled as he started drinking. Melanie had a glass of wine in her hand. "Hey, we have a can of those special mixed nuts in the pantry. Hold on a moment, I'll get them." The good thing about Highness is that it's impossible to tell what's in the green bottle. The beer went down the drain. I came back with a can of mixed nuts and a bottle of tap water. Up to that point, I still had to justify my doubts about Melanie. We chatted for about 20 minutes, and she came out with 2 more Highness. Now I knew Walter and Melanie were up to no good. They both knew about my beer problem and seemed to be using it to their advantage. I don't know what Walter did or said to Melanie, and I don't even know when he did it. Maybe they planned it all during the short drive home. It didn't really matter. I excused myself and went to the bathroom. The beer went down the toilet along with the urine, and I came back with another bottle filled with water. I noticed a smile on Walter's face when I took a big gulp. That just made me furious, but when I saw Melanie's smile, I was enraged. Normally, after 2 bottles of beer, I fall completely asleep. It was easy to pretend to be sleepy, and I even acted like I was trying not to fall asleep. I finished the water from the second bottle and slowly went to the kitchen. I made a show of throwing the empty bottle away and opening the fridge to get a new one. When I came back with the third bottle, Walter was grinning from ear to ear, and Melanie was blushing. I quickly finished the water from the last bottle, closed my eyes, and started breathing heavily, as if I were asleep. My wife and my brother whispered softly, turning off the lights in the living room and heading down the hallway to the bedroom. They both knew I wouldn't be around all night. I was out cold. I waited about 20 minutes and then went to the bedroom. The door opened without any problems. The moonlight coming through the bedroom window made it easy to see what my brother and my wife were doing on our bed. They had no idea I was there watching. The night was just beginning, and I had a 3-hour drive ahead of me. I must say, Walter drew a good map. I had no trouble finding his cabin in the woods. It was a beautiful place and must have cost him more than $250,000. 30 minutes later, I was already on my way home, and in the rearview mirror, the cabin looked like a big orange ball. I sat further down the street from the house, out of sight, just as the sun was coming up. Suddenly, Melanie appeared at the door. She looked around and, seeing that my truck wasn't there, hurried back into the house. 10 minutes later, Walter ran out of the house, got into his precious Mercedes, and sped down the street. It was still early, so I went to a cafe for breakfast. Melanie left for work at 8. At 8:10, our precious house and all our savings went up in smoke. I stayed by the truck for a while to make sure everything worked as it should, and then I headed downtown to close our accounts. I only managed to gather a couple of $1,000s. We weren't rich and had spent all our money on buying the house. When I got back home, the police and fire trucks were still everywhere. Melanie was there talking to the police. I approached her Ford Focus and slipped one of my special bags under the passenger seat. It was a mixture of gasoline and polystyrene with a small igniter made from a remote-controlled car. I'm not sure, but I think Melanie saw me leaving when her precious little car caught fire. My work here was done. It was time to move on. I had never been to North Carolina before. It was beautiful, but I wouldn't want to live there. It took me 2 days to find out where Walter lived. Damn, his house was better than the cabin. It must have been about 600 square meters, and the garage had space for 3 cars. I had to park a few blocks away to keep an eye on the house. My old truck would have raised suspicions in that neighborhood. I never saw Walter, but his wife Emma took their 2 kids out to catch the school bus. A while later, she left the garage in her Subaru Outback. On the front was a sticker advertising a local real estate company. I had no trouble getting into the house. You'd think they'd have a security system, but they didn't. No one would dare rob Walter. Walter wasn't home, but his Mercedes was in the garage along with a nice Harley Davidson. Actually, it was a big Harley. I quickly went through the house to make sure it was empty and found out it wasn't. In the laundry room, there was a litter box, but no kitten. I spent a few minutes looking and then decided to use a can opener. 10 seconds later, the kitten appeared looking for food. A few minutes later, it was comfortably in a cat carrier I found in the garage. Finding Old North Realtors wasn't hard. I only had to ask for directions once. I walked in through the front door and asked for Emma Clark. She soon came out, and I handed her the cat carrier. She looked at the cat and then at me, just for a moment. "Oh no. Mickey, you didn't. Please tell me you didn't." We had never met, but she immediately understood who I was. "I'm sorry. It had to be done. I didn't want to hurt your cat." "Why, Mickey? Why? What good is it that you burned your own brother's house to the ground?" "You'll have to ask him. I'll call you in a week. If he doesn't tell you by then, I'll tell you myself." We were interrupted by an agitated man who came running through the door. "Call the fire department. There's a car on fire in the parking lot. Hurry." Emma looked at me, but I just shrugged and turned away. As I was leaving, I heard the secretary in the office tell my sister-in-law that the firefighters were already at her house. By this time, I had calmed my anger. I was still mad, but I no longer felt the urge to set anything else on fire. I drove west for a while and then south. I spent a few days in northern Alabama. There were many roofing jobs, which I found out were caused by several strong hailstorms in the area. The big problem was that all the roofers seemed to be Mexican. They worked in teams, and the quality of their work was excellent. My hopes of finding any work seemed slim until I saw an ad in the local newspaper looking for insurance inspectors for roofing jobs. I cleaned myself up as best I could with the few things I had with me. Apparently, it was enough because I got the job right away. They paid to send me to a 2-week training, and then I became a qualified insurance agent at one of the big companies. They had so many claims that the work would last me at least 6 months. I had no trouble using my own name and social security number. I'm sure several law enforcement agencies were looking for me, but not in Alabama. I bought a small apartment and then sold my old truck. The insurance agency provided me with a car, as well as extra money for gas and maintenance. I did my job, and I did it well. Everyone was happy. I didn't meddle in other people's business and stayed out of trouble. Shortly after settling in, I called my brother's wife. She said that Walter claimed to have no idea what had driven me to commit the arson. I promised to tell her what happened if Walter refused, but I decided to change my mind. I told her that since he refused to be honest with her, I would have to come back to that conversation later. When I hung up, her voice sounded worried. My new job forced me to take care of my appearance. I had to cut my hair and shave every day. These were grooming habits I knew about but never considered necessary. Maybe that's why it took me so long to find a wife or have a steady girlfriend. I usually had dinner at a fast food restaurant and sometimes at a sit-down restaurant. Lunch was always rushed. Since I was the worst drinker in the world, I avoided socializing at the bar. About once a month, I called home. My parents expressed their disappointment in what I had done. I never gave any explanations or excuses. Finally, after about 6 months, Melanie told them the truth. Because of our childhood relationship with Walter, they understood the problem. Walter suddenly lost their favor. My father confronted him face to face, and he denied everything. Fortunately for me, they believed Melanie. Melanie tried to find out where I was and what I planned to do with our marriage. She had been living with her sister since the house burned to the ground. That was the last time they mentioned her. In the conversations I had with my parents after that, my brother or my wife were never mentioned. My parents knew that I could only continue talking to them if they avoided those two topics. I did my job, and I did it well. Many local churches offered free English as a second language courses. Soon I started attending these classes and learning Spanish. During this time, I made some friends. Some of them were roofers I talked to when I worked. There were also some bricklayers, carpenters, and concrete workers. They worked hard during the day but never missed English classes at night. They often joked about their kids, who attended public schools and spoke perfect English without an accent. Many wives attended the classes with them. Soon my employer decided that I spoke 2 languages. I never learned to speak Spanish correctly, but I had no trouble maintaining a conversation with the workers. My arson crime was never investigated. I'm sure there were police reports, and my name was in every one of them, but no one came looking for me. I used my own social security number on all my work documents and even filed the appropriate federal income tax return. Nothing. I had been away for about 2 years when my dad had a stroke. By the time I found out, he was already home but needed a lot of care. My mom asked if I could come home to visit him. I couldn't refuse. I took 2 weeks off work and bought a used Ford Focus, just like the one Melanie used to drive. It was cheap and had good gas mileage. I filled the trunk with some of my things and hit the road. I rented a motel about 50 kilometers from home, in case someone was still looking for me. I spent the first day with my parents and caught up on the news. Walter and Emma had built a new house, bigger and more majestic than the previous one. Dad winked at me when Mom gave me their new address, in case I wanted to send them a Christmas card. I think I have an ally. Melanie stopped calling and visiting them. They hadn't heard anything from the police or insurance companies for over a year. They wanted me to stay home, but I insisted on going back to the motel. When I was leaving, it was already late, but I decided to stop by Melanie's sister's house. I was sitting outside the house when a very large pickup truck arrived. The couple in the car kissed for a few minutes, and then my wife got out of the car and headed to the house. The guy waited until she got to the door, which I thought was considerate. She turned to him, smiled, and waved before going inside. I was glad I had brought some of my things. A few kilometers from there was a late-night diner, and it seemed like my wife's new friend needed to refuel. He parked in the middle of the lot so no one could ding his wonderful truck. I parked on the edge and approached the Dodge to place an order, a special order. He sat at a table by the window and was finishing placing his order when I approached his table. "Is that your Dodge out there?" "Yes." "Why do you ask?" "I just saw you come in. It's definitely a great truck. Mind if I sit?" He just nodded, and I called the waitress over. "Something like that must cost a lot of money, right?" It was a comment, but I made it sound like a question. "The truck cost me $36,000, but I also spent over $10,000 on accessories." I never knew his name, but we talked about his truck for the next 20 minutes. I just had a coffee, and he ordered the midnight special breakfast. "I don't want to seem curious, but aren't you the guy dating Melanie Clark?" "Yes." "Do you know her?" "We went to high school together." "I thought she was married." It was another comment phrased as a question. "She is married, but her husband has been dead to her for a long time. The cops are looking for him for burning down his own house." "Stupid bastard. Why did he do it?" "Melanie said she caught him having fun with his brother. He also burned down his brother's house." "Did she admit she was sleeping with his brother?" "Yes. She said her husband wasn't giving her enough attention, so she had to look elsewhere. Now I'm going to help her." "That's cruel. Why didn't she just divorce him?" "I don't know. You'd have to ask her." "Why so many questions?" "Just curious." "Aren't you afraid he might find out about you and his wife?" "Not at all. He left a long time ago, and if he came back, I'd beat the crap out of him." I smiled broadly at him, and a strange expression appeared on his face. "Wrong answer, idiot." His eyes widened as I took the remote control and pressed the button. The homemade napalm instantly covered the Dodge. Surprised, he knocked over the chair and jumped up. "Say hi to my wife." No one saw me leave the diner because everyone was watching the big pile of burning metal in the parking lot in front of the building. I drove very carefully to the motel and decided to check out. 6 hours later, I was in North Carolina inspecting my brother's new house. I expected to see Walter go to work, the kids to school, and Emma to her office. But that didn't happen. Around the same time, 2 police cars and a security company van arrived. The garage door was open, and Emma was busy loading the kids and several bags into her new car. The last thing she put in was the cat carrier. Someone had warned my brother that I was on the move. I'm not stupid. I could do what I had to do another time. I quietly left that area and headed west to the interstate. Near Knoxville, my cell phone rang. It was Emma. I know, Mickey. Now I know. He didn't tell me, but I figured it out. How did you do it? She called early this morning. She called Walter and told him what you did to her boyfriend, or rather, his truck. Then everything fell into place. Walter slept with Melanie, didn't he, Mickey? That bastard slept with his own brother's wife. I'm sorry, Emma. I wanted to tell you, but I couldn't. I hoped you could make him confess. She wasn't the only one, Mickey. There were others, and there will be more. I have to put an end to it, at least as far as I'm concerned. I didn't know what to say. It was obvious that my sister-in-law wanted to talk to someone about the problem, but I wasn't the right person. I'm sorry, Mickey, for what I have to do. I'll do it for you, but I'll say you did it. You won't mind, will you? The way she phrased it sounded like a riddle, but I had no doubt about what she meant. It's okay. I've come this far, so it won't matter. Make it easier for yourself. It seems like no one knows where I am anyway. Emma, if you're going to do it right. Don't rush and don't be careless. Plan ahead and make sure the cat is safe. I heard her laugh on the other end of the line just before we hung up. 2 months later, my brother lost his second big house. According to Mom and Dad, Emma told the police she had seen me at the house the day before the fire. The firefighters were frustrated because the more water they poured on the fire, the more it burned. Emma had done some research on accelerants. Good girl. A week after the fire, Emma filed for divorce. She was pretty smart, and I was sure she would get back at him. Melanie's boyfriend blamed her for the loss of his truck, and she ended up in the hospital while he went to jail. Of course, he knew she had nothing to do with the fire, but I wasn't available. I think I'm ready to file for divorce, but given the circumstances, I don't know how to do it. All I can do is hope that Melanie files for divorce when she gets out of the hospital. I just found out that I'm up for a promotion at work. I also found out that the company I work for is the same one where my brother insured his houses. Wow. Thank you for your time.